This is the nexus between terrorists and criminal organizations. Matthew Taylor, Criminal Justice, Class 810, Liberty University. Crime and terrorism, where profit meets ideology. Opportunistic ventures in the form of criminal organizations and politically motivated terrorist groups are growing throughout the world. The means to achieve different objectives between the two types of organizations overlap in a world of increasing means and trade brought about by globalization and the dark web. The overlapping means to fund and arm criminals and politically motivated groups has given rise to a new state terrorist threat dubbed narco-insurgencies, due to the initial surge of Latin American groups who have effectively combined the advantages of available regional resources with political ideation to combat established government forces. Adapted criminal organizations to support terrorist cells increases the profitability of criminal networks. Products and services likewise benefit the capability of terrorist cells. In areas where no concern power profits from the local production of goods or services, criminal gangs or terrorist cells may seize control of regional trade to impose profitable illicit supply lines. Local citizens may benefit from the profits, and some property often makes the local population a supporter of the illegal operators. Scholarly thought on hybrid organizations that seek profit and political ideology are disputed. The three essential research areas include recognizing criminal organizations that seek profit, while terrorist cells seek political change. The combination of these two types of organizations raises the question of the profit ideology dichotomy. It questions the extent and capability of groups to combine the two objectives to reach a supportive operation within one group. The convergence between the two organization types in some regions supports arguments for operations demonstrating a working methodology between the two ideologies. Organized crime commonly refers to illegal activity conducted by a person or small group working within a political or geographic border. The activity completed by organized criminal groups is designed to increase monetary gain in the safest manner possible. The objective of illegal activity remains profit in the material benefits the organization obtains to support its members in future operations. In the Global Organized Crime Index 2021, organized crime is defined as an international operation of a group or groups of criminal entities who work in conjunction to engage in violent, corrupt, or related activities to obtain, directly or indirectly, a monetary or a material benefit from their operation. Types of international, transnational organized crime entities take on names such as the mafia, cartels, motorcycle gangs, the mob, syndicates, the yakuza, and other types of triads or organized groups. The ultimate goal of these groups is to bring in money, often by illegal means. Examples of criminal endeavors are selling and trafficking drugs, firearms, humans, extortion, and violence. The organizations do not pursue political offices or desire regime changes. Rather, they typically pay off local police, criminal justice, and other politicians with bribes to keep their power with little interference from local authorities. On a global scale, organizations tend to use the same means of bribing dock workers, government entities, and custom agents to move products or services through international ports. Criminal organizations tend to desire anonymity and want to remain unknown to maximize profits. It's in the best interest of criminal organizations to remain unknown so that local police have no devil to put on a pedestal. Criminals who become famous also become targets of a criminal justice system with increased resources. Terrorism is a planned irregular warfare by actors who target civilians and non-combatants to spread fear in a targeted audience beyond the victims of a violent act. Tactics used by terrorists are meant to seek regime change, influence public opinion, and instill feelings of despair and hopelessness. Where the criminal does not want fame, the terrorist calls the media to claim responsibility. They desire to be known and feared by civilian and government entities to make their cause known. Terrorists employ people who have specialized capabilities to build bombs or the tactical knowledge to plan and commence incidents of extreme violence. The violence may be mass shootings or repetitive targeting of individuals. Their action's purpose centers on building support or instilling fear to obtain a political objective. The political ideology of terrorist groups is central to its recruitment. Members tend to operate outside the state and depend on secrecy for movement and housing. Terrorist cells operate independently and without knowledge of how other cells operate to ensure operational secrecy. Top commanders know the full scope of operations and coordinate with local cells to achieve more extensive operations. Some terrorist cells are supported by outside governments who support their operations. Religious operations in the Middle East often operate with funding, training, and arming of members by an outside state such as Iran and Syria. Other political groups may operate with support from the United States and Russia, which have funded operations in Latin America and the Middle East. The groups may take part in violence to reinforce fear in the local population for safety purposes, but a majority of funding and training comes from government support. The politically motivated group fights for an ideal, and recruitment is based on ideology, not financial gain. The terrorist group may operate with or without the support of a legitimate government or alone. The organization may obtain its supplies illegally or through supply lines that its sponsoring government supports. Terrorist groups crave media attention and claims responsibility for its actions. It operates through small cells controlled by networks of agents who pass on directives from higher operations. May need to launder money, but more likely to use drugs and other illegal items as barter for needed items such as explosives and firearms. It recruits based on ideology, whether it be religious or political. It typically operates as a cohesive unit for specific objectives influencing future actions. It has a consistent end goal, and it may capitalize on local products, services, or extortion to operate when funds or means are depleted. The profit-motivated criminal enterprise operates completely outside the government. The profits made by their endeavors are illegal or supported by illegal means, and the benefits from their work must be laundered to make the money appear legitimate to evade raising concerns from local governments of criminal activity. The criminal organization wants to remain secret or keep operations unknown to the public and government. They operate through non-formal networks to exert hidden power. It needs to launder ill-gotten gains to use outside illegal operations. It recruits other criminals who have no political objectives. They work for monetary gain. They operate as individuals or small groups up to large operations. There is no consistent end goal other than constant acquisition of money. And they capitalize on local products and services available to operate. Developing narco states use military-trained individuals organized by a criminal organization to influence national security or fight rivals in criminal trades. In Latin America, a narco is a drug smuggling cartel that operates with laundered and unlaundered money made from drug smuggling to North America. The cartels, or narcos, operate with a limited army of enforcers to obtain territory and absorb illegal products and services into their operations. Cartels have operated as criminal organizations with hierarchical structures where the boss orders enforcers and other operatives to conduct money-making operations. When smuggling operations are threatened, some cartels have resorted to terrorist-like operations to remove political operatives and other government operations meant to undermine their authority and power. A relatively new operator in the 1990s of narcotic supply in Mexico is a group known as the Zetas. The former Mexican Special Forces trained by United States Special Forces decided the money being offered by drug smugglers was more significant than the money made fighting drug operations. The special operators became lieutenants and commanders in the drug trade. Later, the trained soldiers took over the criminal organizations and began a brutal and violent war on the government and other cartels. Counterinsurgency and military tactics have been incorporated into the operations of the Los Zetas. The drug trade financed the Los Zetas, and the soldiers were well paid to be members of the organization after receiving significant training through the military. Although their primary means of existing was earning money, they operated more like a terrorist group by committing violent acts, assassinations, and bombings to terrorize and put fear into the hearts of civilians. Recruits of the Los Zetas were trained in counterinsurgency techniques combined with training methods that desensitized individuals to horrors such as murder. The Los Zetas built camps and training centers to train specialists in violence. Places that offer little for young men are scoured for individuals who lack moral integrity to deny a life of crime and violence. The recruits offered money and power when nothing else is available to give young men hope. The Los Zetas are a criminal organization with no political aspirations. They have adopted terrorism and paramilitary training to expand their operations. Many terrorist operational methods, such as making themselves known to everyone, have benefited to the Los Zetas operation. Unfortunately for the members of the Los Zetas, their hearts have become hardened to God, and the respect for life has been hardened. Regardless of the poverty level experienced by recruits, life with God provides real hope, not temporary hope offered through worldly goods. Proverbs 4:26 tells us to examine our steps and make wise choices, lest we start down paths of excess, which lead to death. You make known to me the path of life in your presence. There is a fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. This is hope for the hopeless. Exploited products and services. Self-sustaining non-state terrorist organizations and criminal organizations share the method of obtaining resources to accomplish organizational goals. Some of the most profitable and typical products to sell are drugs and firearms. Most regions of the world have an illegal drug trade of some size. The types of drugs sold are determined by the fertility of the land and the resources available to make more advanced drugs. Other resources are available in regions with abundant products or services or something unique, such as human trafficking, especially in Africa and Asia, where abundant populations are victimized by promises of new lives and great riches if they'll move to a new country under the care of a would-be trafficker. Rare art, stolen art, and ancient antiquities, such as Islamic use of ancient relics found in the Middle East and Asian countries where Islamic governments have uncovered and sold relics of ancient civilizations to support terrorist activities. Human smuggling, such as individuals and groups who pay sums of money to people who sneak the smuggled people into a new country for a fee. Once there, the smuggled often becomes enslaved by the smugglers who threaten expulsion by turning the illegal victims into that country's authorities. Extortion, most commonly under the guise of protection rackets in which payment is received to protect a business or people from the harm that often the terrorist organization commits. And last, gambling, auto theft, shipping, and anything else that brings in money or may be bartered. Dangers of cross-organizational cooperation. Organizational cooperation between profit and politically based organizations presents both groups with the mutual benefit of their endeavors. The dark web has given criminal and terrorist organizations the ability to communicate needs and develop mutually beneficial cooperation on an international basis. The ability for organizations to find the best deals for firearms, explosives, and other necessary materials has been cataloged and placed on the dark web to be sorted for the sale by suppliers. Organizations in need may shop online almost as quickly as a housewife searching for home supplies on Amazon. Further, the exchange of goods through bartering and Bitcoin now makes money laundering unnecessary for dark operators. Terrorists and criminal organizations now exchange goods and services for non-governmental tracked currencies. Exchanges can be operated through international shipping and smuggling operators with much less danger to the buyer and seller. Growing international cooperation has built an entire economy outside the government system that used to track the money. Alternate currencies and bartering enable organizations to operate more freely. Recent studies have found that turbulent political upheaval and populations who fear terrorism empower criminal organizations to grow within conflicted areas. Legitimate supply and legal goods operations often refuse to transport and participate in less stable regions. Less stability is favorable to the growth and multiplication of criminal organizations when instability exists. It is also in the criminal organization's best interest to ensure the regional terrorist organization is well supplied. Two types of organizations, if not working as one, feed the growth of the other. Methods of fighting global organized crime and terrorism. Transnational organized crime seeks to fill demands for illicit products and services wherever needed. Terrorist organizational motivation has needs that organized crime most often fills. The continued existence and growth of both types of organizations are mutually beneficial to both types of organizations. Finding methods that identify the people involved, the methods by which trading is conducted, the funding of product and services exchanged, and the final smuggling of items to the final destination must be a multinational effort to combat crime and terrorism. In 2011, the National Security Council implemented the U.S. strategies to combat transnational organized crime, to develop research-based laws and regulations that assist in detecting and enforcing criminal laws, to develop and implement international and interagency cooperative measures and agreements, to target illicit wealth and confiscate funds to disarm organized crime and terrorist means to operate, to target identified criminal and terrorist infrastructure, and to build international cooperation with public and private organizations to identify and neutralize organizational members. Research must examine the regional idiosyncrasies which empower the growth of crime and terrorism. The reason for both crime and terrorism is often overlapping, as is the product or service identified to supply the needs of another region. Identification of the reasons and needs for terrorism and criminal organizations are found, and the likelihood of passing effective laws is higher than in nations that cannot identify who and what they are fighting. The rise of Bitcoin and other non-traceable currencies has taken an effective means of fighting crime and terrorism out of law enforcement hands. Illicit organizations previously had to launder the money received before they could use it, and this issue caused a loss of funds. Tracking cash is still an available means of fighting crime because the cash was physical. The online currency is no longer a physical item and therefore harder to trace. The banking system may have an answer to alternative currencies as cashless banking is becoming a reality worldwide. Outside of national boundaries, organized crime and terrorist organizations have greater leeway in operations. International law and cooperation in the enforcement of criminal laws across political boundaries will significantly enhance the enforcement capabilities of nations. The ability to identify, track, and enforce laws upon criminals and terrorists must be enhanced through the international cooperation of governments, regardless of political ideology. The threat posed by organized crime and terrorism is more significant than ideological differences. Conclusions. A recent study found links between sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia cooperation between terrorist and organized crime organizations. Globalization and ease of communication make coordination, sales, and assistance more uncomplicated through an established online presence unknown or untraceable by government bodies and regulations. Further, the lack of jurisdiction in many countries and regions makes illegitimate trade easier. Transnational organized crime and terrorist organizations have helped one another to find and transport necessary products and services that complement each other. Just as these types of organizations help one another get around international laws, jurisdictions, identification methods, and interdiction techniques, the international community must find ways to communicate identification of players on the criminal and terrorist scenes while coordinating new methods of interdiction and confiscation of contraband. International cooperation requires nations to exchange methods and information for investigatory purposes and place national considerations behind the necessary exchange of information. Research regarding communications and transportation methodologies supports identifying cooperative measures which may be codified into legal documents to empower law enforcement agencies. The international community hopes to fight crime and terrorism through research and the quick exchange of information. By breaking how organizations support one another through the dark web and self-funding, governments may be able to disarm or significantly reduce organizational strength among criminals and terrorists.